me at Cello, Cello. You had me at Cello. You had me at Cello. Oh, you had me at Cello. Hi, everybody. Welcome to another edition of Cello Chat. With us this week is Daniel McDonough. I'm super excited to talk with him. Not only is he on the faculty at University of Illinois Urbana-Champaign, but he's a member of the Jupiter String Quartet and a founding member of the East Coast Chamber Orchestra. I'm just dying to ask you about each of those. But first of all, how are you doing, Daniel?
I'm doing really well. Thanks for inviting me to the show. I'm excited to be here.
Terrific, terrific. So the first thing I like to ask everybody, because it's always an interesting story, is how you first got started in the cello and then how your educational journey took you to where you are. And I think one of the things we have in common, I fancied myself initially starting on violin. And did I read somewhere that you at a young age were thinking that route too?
Well, so I began in a program in Austin, Texas called the String Project, which was a Saturday morning community music school headed by a wonderful cellist who you know, I think, very well, Phyllis Young. And this was a program that was affordable, and my parents thought it would be a good idea, and I did what it was. So I went to play the violin, and I think that the school, the string project, needed more cellists, so they convinced me that I had the right size hands to play the cello. It's a very silly thing to tell a 5-year-old. But anyway, I'm very grateful that they sent me down that path. And the string project, as you know, I mean, I'm just so tickled that we share this in common. I didn't realize it until just a few days ago. I'm a little bit embarrassed. But so I left Austin in 1997, and I was in the string project basically until maybe my junior year of high school or sophomore year of high school. So it was a major, it was a very important part of my upbringing, and I studied with perhaps with you, but also with many of Phyllis's grad students.
Yeah.
And it's just, it was a wonderful thing.
Yeah. And then I remember reading Cleveland and Juilliard, but I don't think I know with whom you studied at both those places.
So after I left Texas, I went to CIM, the Cleveland Institute of Music, and I studied with Stephen Gaber, who was the principal of the Cleveland Orchestra. And then I went from there to Juilliard and studied with Timothy Eddy.
Hmm.
And from there, I went to the New England Conservatory and studied with Paul Katz.
All right, terrific, terrific.
So lots
And
of school.
yeah, I mean, I know this is a big ask because you could probably go on for hours about the comparison, but were there like some significant aspects of their approaches to teaching for each of the three of them that just kind of rattle around in your head on a daily basis when you're playing or teaching yourself?
Yes, and now that I've become a teacher, I've been a teacher for the last 12 years here in Illinois. I'm just amazed at how much is back in my mind that I draw upon, you know? It's the kind of thing that when you're in it, you you don't realize how important the information is. I mean, you sort of take the advice and you go to the practice room. And I will answer your question, but it just occurs to me that like how grateful I am to all of my teachers for what they gave me, even though at the time I didn't know how I would use it necessarily. I was using it in the day to day, but to be able to think back on it, you know, decades later, and just realize what it was that they were trying to impart to me is it's like a gift that continues to give, and it makes me want to work harder to be a good teacher. So Steve Gaber, to get to the heart of your question, he was very systematic. I mean, I had to attempt to learn a Popper etude weekly, and he wanted it memorized, and that was a huge challenge. I still have some fear from that. And he was also, uh, he knew exactly, he had the right fingerings, he had the right bowings, he knew what you need to do to be expressive. And it was super good as an undergrad to get kind of spoon fed the way to make expressive sounds on the cello. I mean, he would say, if you do this up bow, it's going to sound better. And then I had to understand why that was. But at the time, I needed that kind of guidance. And he was a beautiful player, is a beautiful player. So he would demonstrate in the lessons and just a hugely expressive player. And also very good with the excerpts. So, I mean, I feel that he really wanted me to take auditions, and in fact, I did. So senior year, he sort of said, "Well, now's the time to learn the excerpts for orchestra auditions." So I did try my hand at that. I had a little bit of success, but I didn't win a job. So then I went to graduate school, and that's when Tim, who had a huge impact on me, came into my life, and I was just so grateful to be able to study with him. He was very patient, very poetic, very thoughtful, and he really challenged me to think about my own playing. And I really felt like that was the right next step for me to really learn how to listen to myself in a new way. I remember lessons where I wouldn't get past 4 bars. I mean, we would spend the whole lesson on a phrase. And it just occurred to me that he was hearing something that I was not hearing. And that in order to get better, I needed to challenge myself to listen in a new way. And that's become a huge part in how I think about teaching and being a musician, and how I think about helping my students improve, is trying to help them realize that becoming a better musician is about becoming a better listener. And that was something that I feel like I got from Tim and also from Paul. So Paul Katz, he came into my life for kind of a graduate diploma slash chamber music degree. So the quartet had already formed, and we moved to Boston, and we studied with him as a quartet, but also I took private lessons with Paul. And he was a master of thinking about sound, teaching me how to think like a quartet cellist, how to think about my intonation like a quartet cellist. Just a beautiful musician. And he really challenged me to think about how I was supporting the quartet in a huge way. So anyway, that's probably too long of an answer, but
No, I love it. I love it. Now, and so to this day on YouTube are you playing some of the famous excerpts, Beethoven 5.
oh God, yeah. No.
You know, but I mean, it's apparent that you could have gone the orchestral route if you had, okay, go to grad school and then throw your hat in that ring again. But was it, I'm just wondering, to what extent was it that you had been turned on to the idea of, no, I want to make a living as a chamber music player versus, and all the successes that the Jupiter Quartet was experiencing. Um,
You know,
yeah, go ahead.
oh, sorry. I've always loved chamber music. I mean, I had experiences through the string project, but also through the Austin Chamber Music Center growing up that really impacted me. And then when I was in Cleveland, of course, Peter Soloff, Don Weilerstein, they were still there. The Cavani Quartet was there. So the chamber music curriculum was just terrific. So that was, and I had a very serious string quartet in my undergrad. So I did really focus on that. But Steve, he's just amazing at teaching the excerpts, and it was a wonderful experience to like actually go out and try to win a job.
Yeah.
It was super stressful, and I realized later that I actually had so much more to learn, and I was grateful in the end that I went back to school, because I felt like I needed some development, some maturity. I could play the excerpts, but I didn't really know what I was doing. You know what I mean? I felt like I didn't have a point of view yet, and it's hard to have them in excerpts. But as a musician, I grew a lot, and I just got older and more mature, and had more experiences, and I have no business recording those excerpts. I gotta say, I'm embarrassed that they're on YouTube.
They're good. You should
I
listen to
did
them
it
again.
because
Good.
I was trying to help out the ILMEA, the
Ah,
Illinois Music Educator Association.
nice. Yeah.
These were the excerpts for the high school kids for
Yeah.
Allstate. So I thought, oh, Allstate is online, and maybe somebody will see it and it can be helpful. But anyway, that's that story.
Nice, nice, nice. Now the Jupiter Quartet. Let's talk about I mean, personally, string quartet playing. I mean, it's just the repertoire is unbelievable. So many masterpieces, and it's so satisfying the degree to which you can blend with the other players and everything. Um, I do, I have to start out so I don't forget because one of my students was curious, and I mean, I suppose understandably so. How does the dynamic change given that two of the players are sisters and one of them's your wife? You know what I mean? Because like what I'm thinking is that a quartet that each person in their own head is thinking, "Oh yeah, I can take criticism." But if they can't really and you still kind of have to use kid gloves, you know what I mean? A quartet where you can really speak your mind and say, "I'm sorry, to me that sounds sharp," or I'm beating you to that beat. Do you want a little time? And they're like, "I think I'm playing it in time." Do you know what I mean? You need to be able to lay your cards on the table candidly as possible. How does that work? Does that change at all? Or do people just put relationships aside and just play their part, as musicians?
Well, I mean, we've been together now like 22 years or something. So there's been an evolution. I mean, it's not always been smooth. And I mean, it's like when you learn to play with anybody, whether they're related to you or not, you have to build a working style together. You have to learn kind of how to respond and how to give constructive feedback and how to build a sound together and support each other and collaborate in a positive way. And especially when times are tough, like in the early days of a string quartet, that can be hard because you're desperate and you you want things to work out, and you're ambitious, and sometimes you lose sight of what really matters, especially when you're young and trying to make a go of it. I think we've gotten much more mature in the way we work together, but I would say that there's a level of trust that comes from being married, first of all, to somebody in your quartet. And I like that. I don't know anything else, so some people might say, "Oh, you were really naive to like invite your boyfriend to join this quartet," but that's what we did, and then we figured out how to make it work. Your boyfriend and your sister, yeah. So you could have a separate interview with Nelson, and you could pick his brain about how he feels about all this. But I honestly think that like we're one of the we may be one of the only quartets that I can think of that still has the original four members that's playing right now. Like that's been, I mean, the Guarneri have now retired, but they
Right.
had a
You're
cello
right.
chamber. So,
You may,
like,
yeah.
yeah,
You may
it's
have a
hard for me
record.
to think of another group that's kept, or Orion. Orion just retired.
Hmm.
And I don't actually know the history of their personnel, but the four of them were together for a really long time.
Hmm.
But
Wow.
anyway, I don't know the ins and outs of that, but I am proud of the fact that we've managed to navigate what you rightly point out, Benjamin, is can be a very vulnerable and tricky thing because you have strong opinions about the music and you want it to go a certain way, but then you also have to learn to make space for other people, and when you learn how to do that, the interpretation gets stronger, I think.
Yeah, that's well said. I like that. And from my own perspective, the quartet I play in Madison for the longest time, we played with the violist on the outside. And I'm
Yeah.
just kind of curious, did you try both ways, or is that just for your F-holes to be pointed out, or what do
I
you
mean,
like about that?
that was the way that we were kind of taught.
Hmm.
Paul Katz really believed in that setup for that reason that you're talking about, having the bass in the middle of the group and the F holes facing out, and the violist has a little bit more maneuverability to kind of rotate. But we have experimented, of course. I mean, I don't know if we ever did it on stage, but certainly in rehearsal. And there was a period of time when we were seriously considering flipping it, but we decided against it. So,
Nice.
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think it works both ways and other ways too.
It does. It really does. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. East Coast Chamber Orchestra. You're a
Hmm.
founding member, and it's intriguing for a number of reasons. I like, again, I've watched several videos online, and the quality is very high. I think there's always an interest in the ensembles that are conductorless,
Yeah.
and to a certain extent there's the kind of like the implications within the ensemble from a standpoint of delivering a high quality product, but there's also an interest from the audience, like, wait, we thought there had to be somebody with the batons, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a degree to which there's something even to people who are not already passionate about live chamber music or live art music that is intriguing to them too. So I'm just curious, how did this get started? And can you kind of tell some of the backstory of this ensemble as well?
Sure. So, Echo, or the East Coast Chamber Orchestra, is like a 15 to 18 person unconducted string ensemble. And it was started right around when I was leaving graduate school. So this would have been 2002 or something. And basically, we just thought it would be fun. And we had no concerts, and we were all trying to figure out, like, what are we going to do now that we're going to be graduating from school? And it was people from Philly and New York and Boston, so we called ourselves the East Coast Chamber Orchestra, and we would all just kind of converge on Philadelphia, and we, got some church space for free to rehearse in, and we slept on each other's couches, and we had very inefficient rehearsals. I mean, it was unbelievable. I mean, if you were talking about string quartets. I mean, this was, 18 people trying to figure out what to do. And we felt really strongly that there was not going to be like a hierarchy. Like, it wasn't going to be like section leaders run the rehearsal. It was like anybody can talk. So again, that was a huge learning experience for me because not only did I get to sit next to other cellists, which I never had got to do, but I learned so much from my peers. I tell my students this story all the time, but I remember sitting next to a cellist named Efe Batasigil, who's now the principal of Seattle, and I mean, he's an amazing player, and we were playing, Tchaik Serenade or something, and one day I asked him, I said, "So Efe, what do you do like when you're practicing?" And he said, "Oh, I play everything like it's a beautiful slow movement." And I said, "Oh, what a great idea!" Like just these little interactions that I had with not only the cellist but everybody in the orchestra. It was great. So we managed to get some help with building some concerts. And it continued to be totally disorganized, but we began to have some things to do. It never was a very profitable enterprise. We eventually became a not-for-profit. And we've just kind of tried to keep the spirit of it going. This kind of artist collective where we're not in it for money. We're not in it for fancy concerts. We're just in it to kind of be with each other, learn from each other. So I mean, to be honest with you, I can't do it as much as I used to be able to. We were very lucky last year or 2 years ago to play one of Jesse Montgomery's pieces with that group again. So we kind of went back into it and played the quartet parts for Banner, which is a great piece that she wrote. And it was just a treat to be, back in the group, and we played Death and the Maiden on the second half. So, it was super fun, and I hope to be able to do more of it. It's just really hard with quartet and
Yeah,
teaching.
sure, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. But and definitely I want to get to the teaching too in a moment. But I'm just thinking sometimes, I'll tell my students, hey, here's whom I'm going to be talking to. Do you have questions to pass along? And other times I just try to imagine what they would ask you as well if you were at our university for a master class. And this thing of the democratically run rehearsals, you know, because especially 18, but even four people in a quartet, there can be times where even if everybody has a right to speak up at any given time, within certain types of passages or certain pieces, it's clear that some people kind of like have a stronger vision than others, you know what I mean? And other people almost just kind of exercise veto power and go, maybe that's too much. Or, well, if we do that, then shouldn't we do this over here to balance it or something like that? So I'm wondering if you have, whether from the quartet or the chamber orchestra experience, anything that you want to say kind of about the way that these chamber ensembles whose philosophy is democratic, you know, how you go about it's like you don't have to opine on every single thing.
Right. Yeah. I mean, you have to learn not to talk too much and to demonstrate with your playing. I mean,
Yes,
that's a
yes.
skill also, which relates to what I was talking about with listening. I really feel like with both Echo and the Jupiter Quartet, we talk a lot less than we used to. Like when we were 22 or 23, we had a lot to say. We thought we knew everything, and I think now we're more humble. And also, we know that we're going to get better by listening and reacting and playing. Of course, there's still discussion and talking, but I think we recognize that we can't control everything, and also it breeds spontaneity. If you're
Yeah.
learning in rehearsal to listen and react instead of trying to control, then I think you're going to be in a better place on stage. So a lot of what I talk to my chamber music students a lot about is this idea of like simultaneously leading and listening, so that you should never be following in chamber music. You should always be actively showing something while responding at the same time. And I think it's hard for people to hold those two things, at the same time. Like those, they feel like they don't go together. But when you figure out how to be expressive and be communicative while still leaving room for response, I think you're in the heart of chamber music.
That's really well said. You've got some of Timothy Eddy's poetry in you, I think.
I got a lot of it. He talked so beautifully. If I could have 1% of what he said, I would be thrilled.
All right, let's talk about teaching a bit. David Kaplan speaks very highly of your teaching. I'm wondering, there's a question I ask about motivating students, but just in general, so like, some teachers are very structured, for example, some try to inspire and be all about musicality. how would you describe, is there kind of any particular thing that you think of as in terms of your own approach to teaching?
I mean, it's hard to summarize it in, a one sentence.
Yeah.
I'm still discovering it as I go. Um, One thing that I do believe really strongly in, and my students hear me talk about it a lot, is figuring out how to never divorce the music from the technique, right? So I think a lot of times we go into our practice room and we sort of woodshed and we stop thinking about what it is we want to say with the music or what the phrasing is or the quality of the sound is, all of the elements that go into being expressive. I feel like when we take that out of it, even if we're practicing slowly, even if we're just practicing a bar, I feel like we should always be engaged somehow with what it is we hope to be able to say. And that can be challenging because you're first learning the notes and but you should never just have a, well, I mean, what do I know? But I found it helpful. Let me say that. I found it helpful for me to always start from a place of music and then introduce the technique and try to keep the two things linked as I explore a piece. I'll never forget, I went to Tim Eddy and I said, "Oh, we're learning this Haydn string quartet." And he was like, "Oh, so what do you do when you're first learning a piece?" And I was like, "Oh, so we don't play with any vibrato and we play really slow. We try to get it really in tune." He was like, "That's the worst idea I've ever heard." He said you should play it through 3 times in a row, just sight reading and getting attached to the feeling in the music. And that was a huge lesson for me. And I've also, one of the things I learned from the Cleveland Quartet, which is, I think, related to this concept, is that the pulse is the thing that binds the music to the technique, right? So when we feel the pulse in a characterful way, we can connect to the music because the music has pulse, or most music has pulse. And then also our bodies make the cello go through pulse, through actions in our hands that are rhythmic. So by figuring out how to use the pulse as a kind of common denominator that connects the music with the technique in your body, it makes cello playing easier. I found that that opened up a lot for me in my own playing. I could focus on how I wanted my body to feel related to the pulse of the music, and that made it easier to play the cello. So that's another way of kind of marrying technique and musicianship. So that's I guess that's a tenet of my teaching
Yeah,
philosophy.
that's excellent. That's excellent. That's Phyllis Young would say something somewhat like that,
Yeah.
just in terms of the impulses that, like the pulse,
Yes.
you know, and then very often people make the mistake of holding on to an impulse rather than it has to be, that there was the onset, the arrival, and then the
The
release of
release.
it as it
Yeah.
flows into the next thing.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. I mean, I'm so interested to hear, like, because I don't think I have any original ideas. I mean, I feel like I don't know where they come from, but they come from like this legacy of great teachers that I had. And then I guess, synthesized them in my own way. But I think that's such a beautiful thing that, like, if, Phyllis had that and her grad students probably had that. And I mean, it's just so cool.
Yeah, we were talking about Steve Sensbach a little bit ago,
Yeah.
and Steve. Well, anyway, are you familiar with his book on the French sonatas from I want to say 1865 to 1915?
Yes, I have it on my shelf. He sent me a copy. Yeah, with a really nice note. I'm just so sad that I didn't get to say bye to him. But for those people who don't know, he was a doctoral candidate when I was in high school. So he was your colleague, I suppose, and he was my teacher. And he was a student of Navarra, and then he came to Texas, of all places,
Yeah.
But he was very dedicated. I mean, he kind of took me under his wing and gave me a lot of Navarre's exercises and made me play thirds and sixths and
Mhm.
uh, octaves and scales, which I had never done. And I'm just so grateful. I mean, that I believe so strongly that you have to do that stuff, and I make my students do it. And
Right, right. Yeah, I think in some ways that makes the most sense to me in terms of when we are separating technique from musicality. It's like there's certain things in your warm-up routine. Make sure that your octaves are in tune.
yeah,
Just certain things before you start applying them to repertoire where you want it to all be about why is this composer having me play these notes? What am I trying to say through these sounds? And
yes,
your technique is there to enhance that because you already did the setup.
yes, totally. Yeah, I mean, I believe that you have to have a significant amount of technical work that happens outside of the music. But you would find me telling my students, like if they're playing legato scales, to really care for the sound of the legato and to pay attention to their bow changes and to crescendo to the top of the scale and things that you would do naturally in music to build that habit of never playing empty, even
Amazing.
in the technique work. So I don't know. I don't
Excellent.
know if that's what David enjoyed about my teaching or not, but he's a wonderful cellist.
Isn't he? He really is. He really
He
and
spoke so highly of you too, Benjamin.
oh,
I mean, how
excellent.
did you meet him?
All right. And such a wonderful person too.
Yeah,
So many of these musicians, it's it's so great to share music. David and I have a two cello set of concerts coming up. And I mean it's great to get to know great people in life, period.
yeah,
But then to make music with them and like what you say, where you're both of you are listening so carefully to what the other person's doing. It's like what the improv comics call yes and.
yes. That is such an important philosophy for chamber music. Yeah, yeah, that's so cool. Oh, and I didn't realize it was I thought it was a podcast, so I didn't dress up. But it occurs to me that I'm all ears on underneath. Here you go.
Wow, I gotta get me one of those.
It's
All right. Well, I have two more questions. One of them I like to ask people about is just kind of the running theme of this show. There can be times when youngsters, part of it is just being a youngster, where they can hit some sort of a roadblock and need a little bit of an extra help getting motivated. So I'm just kind of wondering when people hit some sort of a hurdle like that with their cello playing, do you have any things that you like to do to help keep students heading, practicing getting their cello out, doing the right thing so that you know that they're going to advance in the way that they're glad that they will have in the long run?
yeah, that's something we all go through, these kind of periods where we're, you know, not feeling motivated or doubting that we're doing the thing that we should be doing, or, I mean, that's a totally normal thing, and I've been through it. What helped me and what I sometimes, encourage my students to do is to go to concerts. So if they're feeling uninspired, I send them to listen to live music and hopefully hear a piece they've never heard before, hear a performance that wants that makes them want to get back into the practice room. I mean, I can remember these experiences in my life, like watching, for example, a Karen Tuttle masterclass. I mean, Karen Tuttle was a great viola pedagogue, the greatest of the 20th century. And I saw her give a class and she was, very elderly, but so, you know, inspiring. And I was feeling at the time like I don't know what I should be doing. And I saw her teach and I was like, I'm in. And I went to the practice room, I tried all the things that she had done. So, you spend 4 years with your teacher or 2 years or whatever. Sometimes you need also like fresh ears and a new perspective and go see a master class, go take an online cello course. I mean, I'm very not what's the word, possessive of my students. I think they need to have as many experiences as they can, not just cello, other string instruments, voice, piano. We can learn from all of these instruments. I'm
Dancing.
dancing, dancing. Yes, totally. Yeah, I loved your video with the chalk artist too. I mean, that was amazing. That kind of stuff just touches me, like where you guys are responding to each other. That's really cool.
Yeah, that's great suggestions. Let's see. So, and then I'm sure you have a lot of irons in the fire. What are some of the upcoming concerts or projects that 2024 25 has left in store for you?
Well, I'll mention two that are kind of unusual. One of them is at the Krannert Center for the Performing Arts, which is our big performing arts center here. So we cooked up this program that involves choir, a chamber choir, and we asked a composer to write a new piece for it. Her name is Sulian Tan. And then we sought out somebody to write new text for it. And there's a wonderful botanist and scholar and poet named Robin Wall Kimmerer. And for those of you who don't know who she was a MacArthur Genius recently, and she's written a book called Braiding Sweetgrass. And it's all about our duty to kind of care for the earth, basically. So our connection as like one species in a larger planet to all of the beauty in the natural world. Long story short, she agreed to write this original poetry for this new piece, and we were supposed to play the concert in mid-October, and she called and she said, "I can't come. I got an invitation to the White House." So apparently we were like, well, we said, okay, well, how can we say no to that? So she was awarded the National Humanities Award from Joe Biden, and we rescheduled the concert for January 26th. So it's a unusual concert of all chamber choir and string quartet pieces that are centered around issues of the environment and sustainability. So we'll also play a piece that was written for us called Two Unpathed Waters, Undreamed Shores by a fellow echo violinist, Michi Wianko, which is a piece about climate change, and some other pieces as well. And then the other concert that I'll mention, since you asked, is we're delighted to go to the Library of Congress in February and play on their matching set of Strads. So they have these beautiful old instruments that are part of their collection, and you can only play them if you're in their space. So you go a couple days early and you rehearse in the Library of Congress, and then you get to play a concert. So those are two things I'm super excited about.
I can see why. That's excellent. Wow. Well, best of luck with both.
Thanks.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel. It's been everybody as much fun as I knew it would be talking with you about these various things, and I look forward to visiting with my own students about their reactions. So thanks for sharing your time and your thoughts.
Well, thanks for hosting me, Benjamin. This is a really cool thing, and I'm really glad to talk to you and realize that we have these connections. It's such a small world, isn't
It
it?
really is.
Yeah. I
Billions
hope we
of
can meet in
people.
person soon.
Yeah, that would be great too. That'd be great too. And
Say
to
hi
all
to.
of you out there, have a great week of practicing, and we'll meet back here same time next week. Take care.
You had me at Jello.